thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
President Thomas Jefferson said, "I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power."
Welcome to WallBuilders Live. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday, and I think that quote by Jefferson is becoming one of my favorites. It's so true. If we think people are not exercising their discretion or, living their free citizen rights correctly, we shouldn't take those rights away. We should inform their discretion with knowledge on the Constitution. And that's what we do every Thursday here on WallBuilders Live. We talk about the founding principles of America, how to apply them, and how to save the country. And we love taking your questions on these Thursdays. So, David, let's inform a little of our discretion today.
Yeah, there's some good, and this is a lot of fun, Rick, because I have in front of me a huge stack of questions that we get from folks, and they're really good questions. And you and I have talked before; they really make us think through some things, and that's always one of the most fun parts I have when I'm out speaking is when we do questions and answers at the end, because then you really get into practical application. You get into now, you gave me the principles, but now show me how this really works in real life. And we got a bunch of those kind of questions today, so this will be a lot of fun.
All right, let's jump right in. First one we have is from Joe Shoemaker. He said, "I've been listening to your Myth of the Judiciary podcast and have a question. If the judiciary can only give an opinion, why are they even there? Why do we need them?"
And what he's talking about, that podcast, The Myth of the Judiciary, we have a presentation called 5 Judicial Myths, and it goes through the 5 things that we get told today by courts and law schools that are absolutely historically wrong. That we hear that the 3 branches are co-equal. No, they're not. They're not co-equal at all. The judiciary is the only branch in the Constitution that's really shaped by the other 2. The only judiciary the Constitution requires is a Supreme Court. Anything else in the court system, whatever other court there is a creation of Congress. Congress gets to decide what issues come before the court. There's only half a dozen or so original jurisdiction issues. Other than that, the court deals with hundreds of issues a year. The Congress at any point in time can tell the court, you can't touch this issue. This is out of bounds for you. Judges don't get to put themselves there. The people don't put them there. They have to have an executive that puts them there, and they have to be confirmed by the Congress. So in so many ways, judges don't get to set their term of their annual term. The Supreme Court meets about 9 months a year. That's by decision of Congress. That isn't the Supreme Court who said how long they're going to meet. And the Congress could say, Supreme Court, you're going to meet once every 10 years, and it would be completely constitutional. So the notion that the 3 co-equal branches is absolutely refuted by the Constitution and by the Founding Fathers. And of those 5 judicial myths, one of them was that the judiciary gets the final word on what happens with the law. And as the Founding Fathers pointed out, they strenuously objected to that. That was raised back in their day, and they said, no. All 3 branches are capable of understanding the Constitution. And they pointed out that if one branch was able to override the others, then that becomes, and they said, as Jefferson said, it becomes an oligarchy. If the court can tell every other branch what to do, then it's an oligarchy. It's a tyranny. And so they never allowed the unelected branch to tell the others what to do. So the question then becomes, okay, if it doesn't get to do that, then why does it even exist? And that's what Joe's asking. If they can only, and what he's commenting about is they can only give an opinion. If you will read the decision of any court today, it says the opinion of the court. It does not say the law of the court. So when the Supreme Court comes down and says, hey, we have decided that marriage, the defense of marriage law in Congress is gone, that it is done, that we're going to have homosexual marriage, people say that's the law of the land. That's not the law of the land. It says the opinion of the court. And so in previous generations, we knew that was the opinion of the court, which is why very often the executive branch would say, thanks for your opinion, but that's not what we're doing. And so in the Civil War, you have Abraham Lincoln that didn't look at the Dred Scott decision as the law of the land. That was the opinion of the court. And so, in contrary to Dred Scott, he freed blacks. And contrary to Dred Scott, he ended slavery in Washington, D.C. And contrary to Dred Scott, he gave the Emancipation Proclamation. All of that violated the court's opinion, but not the court's law. So courts have a distinct role, and number one, their opinion is really good. The Bible says if you want to go to war, get advice, but if you want to win the war, get many advisors. And there's times you need the court to say, hey, you guys, this is an unconstitutional law. And they look at it and say, oh, we hadn't thought about it from that standpoint. Really good point. And so sometimes the court can help prevent unintended consequences by giving you their opinion. And the other branches read that and say, let's go back and change that law and make that work the right way we thought it was going to work. Other times you need the court there to say, hey, we have a trial that just happened here, and in the trial the law was not followed. They did not do what they were supposed to do. They did not allow the accused to confront his accuser. They held the accuser out. And so as the court, we're saying this trial was no good. It has to be done again because you didn't follow the laws. Well, that's what the courts are there to help uphold the laws, to help interpret the laws. And when you when a law can be seen in two possible directions and two attorneys argue over it, the court gets to decide, no, this is what the original intent was, this is what they meant. But that's not the law of the land. That's just helping ensure justice for those who come into court. And that was the role of the court. They can give their opinion to the other branches and should give their opinion, but they're not there to make policy and they're not there to make law. That's what the elected branches do.
So they're really just applying what the other branches have done to specific facts.
Yeah, they apply what the other branches have done, and if you want to say it, they make law in their own realm. And because Congress, any law of Congress is higher than any judicial law in their own realm. So they can make it a policy in their realm, say, heads up, all other judges, this is the paperwork we expect you to file when you do a court case. This is what we want to see from you. If you're going to do an appeal, we want it in this format, in this order. That's fine. They can direct within their own branch how things should operate, and they can oversee their judges unless Congress gives a different view, and then law trumps opinion every time. So they are very much an advisory branch, but they're very much there to ensure that justice is secured and that the laws of the land are applied as they should be, and that's what the courts do.
Very quick break. We'll be right back. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday right here on WallBuilders Live.
John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other."
This is Dr. Tony Evans with the Urban Alternative, and I have one simple question. Do you plan to vote? If not, why not? It's an opportunity to participate in this republic in a unique way. Don't stand on the sideline and throw stones when you can get in the game and cast a ballot.
This message brought to you by National Religious Broadcasters, reminding you, make plans now and vote November 4th.
This is Governor Rick Perry. Throughout American history, people of faith have risen to the task of meeting difficult challenges. Today, we're once again being called to action to restore our nation, this time at the ballot box. Your vote is your voice. When you vote your values, you send a message that America remains one nation under God. I'm Governor Rick Perry, and I'm asking you to stand up and be heard. I'm asking you to vote this November.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Calvin Coolidge said, "The more I study the Constitution, the more I realize that no other document devised by the hand of man has brought so much progress and happiness to humanity. To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race."
I just can't help but smile when she does that. It's so cute, and it's so true. It's absolutely true. We are so blessed to live under this Constitution. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday here on WallBuilders Live. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton. We're addressing some of your questions today. And, David, our next question comes from Michael. He says, "Hey, Rick and David, I have a question. Hypothetical situation. President's the commander-in-chief of the military. We have election day in November every 4 years when we vote and decide who we want as president. The person we elect does not take office till sometime in January. What if we had a president who refused to leave office, and the Congress, for some reason or another, refused to impeach him. The military would have to do what he says because he's commander-in-chief, and there's no telling what that would be in this situation. Is there anything in the Constitution that would allow us as states or private citizens to stop them? I'm asking because I don't think Obama is going to leave office quietly, and we need to be prepared, in my opinion, for that situation. Thank you very much for your time and attention. David, I used to hear this one with Clinton as well. I think there are a lot of people that really are concerned. Would a guy that's been this bad of a president, are they going to walk away and peacefully hand over power?
Well, there's two questions here. There's a political aspect of it and the constitutional aspect. So we'll deal with the Constitution in a bit, but I think he's going to walk away. I don't think there's any way he stays. If you look at even the elections going right now, his senators are running away from him as fast as they can. And so in so many states, they don't want him showing up. They don't want him in Louisiana. They don't want him in Arkansas. They don't want him in all these states. And you think if he did something like this, that has never been done before in our history, that they would stand there? No way. If they did, there would be no Democratic Party for the next 20 years. So out of pure political, selfish self-interest, they know that this would not fly with the American people. And I don't care whether you're Democrats or Republicans. You take the Democrats in West Virginia. You think Democrats in West Virginia are going to, or Democrats in Arkansas, or, there's so many still conservative Democrat states, not at the federal level, but at the state level, there's still some conservative Democrats out there, Kentucky, elsewhere. You think they'd put it? No way. So from a political standpoint, if this were to happen, it would be the demise of the Democrat Party for at least 20 years. Now, from a constitutional standpoint, the scenario, there are so many checks and balances that are available here. So let's say that he refuses, that a hypothetical president refuses to leave office. He's not going to do that. So Congress doesn't impeach him. The thesis is the military would have to do what he says because he's the commander-in-chief. Well, first off, the military takes an oath to uphold the Constitution, not to obey the commander-in-chief. And that is a huge deal. And that's why in the military it is still part of instruction now. The Obama administration has been fighting this and been trying to take it out, but you still have the basis of what's called lawful orders. You still teach that. And you teach that because of what went on with Hitler and the Nuremberg trials and others. The defense in the Nuremberg trials with Hitler's Gestapo and SS, we just did what we were told. Well, it was not a lawful order. Hitler did not have the lawful order to destroy 13 million folks, 6 million Jews, 13 million Gentiles. He did not have, and you should have known that. And so this is a huge thing in the military. You teach lawful orders. If you go into a situation in Iraq or Afghanistan, and your commander says, find every man, woman, boy, and girl, and kill them all. Soldier will say, no, sir, I'm not going to do that. I'll kill an enemy combatant, and if I think that woman is an enemy combatant or she has a bomb strapped to her, I'll kill her. But I'm not rounding up every man, woman, boy, and child and just slaughtering them. And so military is taught to obey lawful orders. So the first thing is they take an oath to the Constitution, not to the President. Under the Constitution, the President is Commander-in-Chief, but if what he says violates the Constitution, they're not going to fall to the President. Also, the fact the President's Commander-in-Chief doesn't make him the commander over the military, because Article 1, Section 8 says that Congress gets to decide all the policies regulating the land and sea forces. So it still comes back to Congress to run so much of the military. The President is Commander-in-Chief for day-to-day decisions, but when it comes to policy stuff, it's back to the Congress. So there's a lot of checks and balances that would be there, but from both a political standpoint as well as from a constitutional standpoint, don't think that scenario is going to happen, and it's certainly not going to happen, I don't think, in our lifetime. Even as much change as we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years, there's still massive pushback from it by the American people. The ratings of the president continue to fall. They go lower and lower. Clearly, even in his own party, more and more people are putting their arms up and keeping it at arm's length. I mean, it's just, I don't think the situation will happen. But that,
yeah, I think even his own people want him to go at this point.
That's right.
The Democrats are saying, we don't want him at our events, and they're walking out of events when he goes, so his own supporters are ready for him to leave.
That's right. It's not a good situation for them. And were this to happen, that'd be the end of the Democrat Party as we know it right now.
Yeah, no doubt. Quick break. We'll be right back with more of your questions here. It's Foundations of Freedom Thursday on WallBuilders Live.
Thomas Jefferson said, in questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution.
In 1776, the difference of one vote gave America the English language instead of German. In 1876, the difference of one vote made Rutherford Hayes President of the United States. In 1923, the difference of one vote gave Adolf Hitler leadership of the Nazi Party. Get the idea? One vote, yours, makes a huge difference. Vote.
This message brought to you by National Religious Broadcasters.
This is Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. The Bible is full of stories of men and women whose faith in God led them to take action during difficult times, trusting that He would work all things out for His glory and the good of His people. Today, God's people are once again being called to take action as we seek to restore the values our nation was founded upon and honor those who have given their lives in defense of our freedom. I'm Governor Bobby Jindal, and I'm asking you to stand up. I'm asking you to vote this November.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Abraham Lincoln said, "We the people are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution."
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live, Foundations of Freedom Thursday. And by the way, you can get more programs just like this in the archive section on our website at wallbuilderslive.com each Thursday, talking about the principles that made our nation great and how to restore them. And David, our next question actually is a little bit of a cross of that. How do you restore this stuff? By stopping the rewriting of history. This one from Pat in Illinois. That's the question. What can we do about the rewriting of our history?
You know, you and I talk in this program a lot about process, and it's not glamorous. People don't like process. It's like watching sausage be made or watching legislation be made. They don't like that, but it takes that to get the end result. And if you want to affect the rewriting of history in the right direction or stop the revisionism of history, you got to understand the process. And the only way that you can rewrite history is if you can get control of the testing, if you can get control of the textbooks and get control of the standards. In other words, you get bad people in who rewrite the standards. The textbooks are then based on the standards, so they rewrite the textbooks, and they test on what's in the textbooks, so they rewrite the test. So if you want to stop the rewriting of history, you have to stop the rewriting that first happens at those three stages, and that's standards and textbooks and testing. But how did you get those people in there in the first place? Well, they came through educational systems. Well, that means we need to back up now and look at the people that are teaching history in colleges and universities. And so that means we need to affect what they do, because they're turning out a product that says we need to rewrite history, so let's stop the source of that product. Let's go back to where the professors are, and let's fix that. And see, this is part of the indoctrination problem that we have right now, is university professors turn out the school teachers. And the school teachers are the ones who are very much involved in writing the standards. So you want to, you know, as the Bible says, in I think it's Luke 3:9, it says, now the axe is laid to the root. If you want to kill the apples on the tree, you don't just keep picking the apples off the tree. You go chop the tree down at the roots. And that's what you have to do here. So you have to back up to that level, which when you do that, this is where it gets significant. I talk to a lot of kids who say, I want to be I want to be a history teacher. And I'll look at them and say, no, you really don't want to be a history teacher. Yes, I do. No, you don't. Yes, I do. No, what you want to be is you want to be a history professor. You want to spend an extra 2 to 4 years in school, because as a history teacher, you get to teach about 30 kids a year, history class, and that's fine. As a history professor, you get to teach about 300 kids a year, and those 300 will then go teach 30 a year. So if you can change things as a history, if you can become a history professor, and we get good folks in there, that's where you'll start changing the course of the nation. Now, this is process, and this requires years to do, but you will not solve the rewriting of history by trying to pick the apples off the tree. You got to go back to the root.
Agree, and you got to have a greater reach. I mean, you're talking about 100, 200 times the reach.
That's right. That's right. And that's how they've done it to us. And you know, we backed out of education. We backed out of other things in the 30s, and again in the 60s. We said, we the church, we need to focus on getting out of here. Jesus is coming soon, and so we don't want to get involved in the secular stuff. And Jesus didn't come when we thought he would, and that shouldn't be a surprise. Scriptures are really clear on that. But nonetheless, Jesus didn't come when we thought he would. Now we're stuck with a corrupt system that we refuse to get involved with. And we're told in Matthew 13:25 that when the good people went to sleep, the enemy came in and sowed the weeds. And we got a lot of weeds to deal with now, but that's because we went to sleep. So that's part of what has to be done. Now, what can you be done? That's the long term. And I'm a firm believer in the principle in Ecclesiastes that you cast your bread on many waters. In other words, you use all sorts of options. You throw as many things out there as you can. You use the long term, the short term, the middle term, the panic term, whatever it is. You deal with it. So the long term solution is we got to get people focused on getting back into being professors. And then from that, we'll start rewriting textbooks and getting them back in the sound direction. Now, outside of that, you can also work with the legislature. You can, for example, bill that we've gotten passed in I don't know, 2 dozen states, the American Heritage Education Bill. And the state legislatures tell the teachers, you cannot prohibit the posting of American government documents in your classroom simply because they contain religion. You can't take down George Washington's Farewell Address. You can't take down the Mayflower Compact. You can't take down these documents simply because they mention religion in them. So you get legislatures involved. Then you get legislatures involved, as we had in Texas, and they say, hey, educators were telling you, in textbooks you do in Texas, you will not say that America is a democracy. You will say that America is a republic. We get bills passed like Rick Green got passed in Texas, like you got passed, the Celebrate Freedom bill that says, hey kids, you're going to spend a full week every year studying the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration. You're going to read those documents, and by the way, you're going to memorize a lengthy passage from the Declaration. So you have sometimes legislators that can step in and help with that. You can have the federal Congress step in. As the House of Representatives has done, they've defunded Common Core. You're not allowed to use any funds for Common Core on the federal level. Well, they're still using them. Well, that's because we don't have the Senate yet. So if you want to get Common Core stopped and get the corruption and the indoctrination out, get a different Senate. Get the Senate changed. That'll make a huge difference in being able to defund that type of stuff because the funding measures come through the House and the Senate. So that's a solution. A third solution is, as a citizen, you have to know this stuff because you don't know history has been rewritten unless you know what history really says. If somebody came up and told me that Abraham Lincoln dropped an atomic bomb, or let's say a nuclear bomb. He dropped a nuclear bomb on Korea to end Desert Storm. If I didn't know history, I might believe that.
Right.
I got to know who Lincoln is. I got to know what Desert Storm is. I got to know who dropped a nuclear bomb, and nuclear bombs never been dropped on any warfare. I got to know all that. So the only way you can recognize the rewriting of history is if you know what history is, which means you individually have to do that. And by the way, you need to get your kids, you need to get your grandkids, get them biographies. At WallBuilders, one of the things we have is a huge section on American biographies. If they'll read biographies, then they get perspective on these guys and know. So that's another solution that's out there. And then there's a fourth thing going on right now. We've had Ken Mercer on to talk about this, but the AP U.S. History course has now been announced that it's going to align to Common Core. And teachers, because of high-stakes testing introduced in the last 20 years or so, everything revolves around testing. If your school gets low test scores, then teachers don't get merit pay, and it could affect their job, and the school district doesn't get as much money from the state or the feds, and affects. So everybody teaches to the test now. Well, the AP U.S. History test, which tests the 450,000 brightest kids in America on American history, brightest American history kids, it is announced that it is no longer having the 5-page guidelines on what to be tested on. It has 142 pages specific. And so the teachers teach that test. And guess what? If you look at that AP U.S. History test that they're starting to use right now, amazingly, in the AP U.S. History test, there is no American Revolution. There's no Lexington or Concord. There's no Bunker Hill or Valley Forge or Saratoga or Yorktown. There are no founding fathers. Ben Franklin's gone, Thomas Jefferson gone, John Adams gone, James Madison's gone. There's not even a Declaration of Independence. So kids, and our top history kids, will not be tested on any of that. And forget the Civil War. There was no Lincoln-Douglas debates. There's no battles in the Civil War, no key battles, no key leaders. There's no Gettysburg Address. There's no assassination of President Lincoln. None of that happened. And you can mark World War II right off the books. There was no Battle of the Bulge. There was no Battle of Midway. There wasn't even D-Day in this history test. There's no Tuskegee Airmen. There's no President Harry Truman. No General Eisenhower, General MacArthur, General Patton, or any other general. But all these things you're saying, that's who we are. I mean, all the things that they've taken out are the very things that made us who we are as a nation, and we're going to take out that foundation. We're taking that out, but you see, if nobody screams about it, then you can do that. It only happens when and grab this, they don't even have Hitler and the Holocaust in the World War II section. That's gone. Hitler and the Holocaust didn't happen. So if we don't make noise to our legislators and say, as we have to do, and by the way, one of the big things that's going right now is what they call the opt-out movement. My kids are not going to take that test. And what happens is these guys make money on how many kids take the test. They get paid, what is it, $50 or $70 a test for every kid that takes the test? Well, if they don't take the test, they don't get paid. And so if Texas, for example, and they're working on it right now, if they vote not to participate in the AP test, that is 10% of all the total kids in the nation that will take that test. 450,000 kids. We got 45,000 in Texas. You take 45,000 kids and take that $50 or $70 off it. That's a bunch of bucks. So go get your state legislature to say opt out of the test. We're not doing the test. I mean, these are all ways you can do it, but it all goes back to knowing history. So, at WallBuilders, that's what we do. Go to the website, look at all those biographical histories, make sure everybody around you knows biographical history, study these lives. But that's the way you get history back in, is you have to know it individually so you can teach it to others.
Well, and the great thing is those tools are available. So it's not like people have to throw their hands up and say, but I don't know where to go. All those tools are available. Go to wallbuilders.com. Get those tools for yourself, for your family, for your church. I mean, there's great videos and, classes that you can do for your Sunday school classes. Everything's there. You just got to be willing to say, I need to know my history so that I know where we came from, I know who we are, I know what these principles are that made our nation great. That's why we do Foundations of Freedom Thursday. We're so glad you joined us to be a part of it today. Be sure and visit us online at wallbuilderslive.com. Thanks for listening today to WallBuilders Live.
Thomas Jefferson said, "The Constitution of most of our states and of the United States assert that all power is inherent in the people, that they may exercise it by themselves, that it is their right and duty to be at all times armed, that they are entitled to freedom of person, freedom of religion, freedom of property, and freedom of press,